Joining me today is Chad Wolf. He is a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and served as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under former President Donald Trump. Chad, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, I just want to dive right in and break down these numbers that were released by Customs and Border Protection on Thursday. More than 212,000 encounters along the southern border in July, a 21-year record, and not to mention that's up 13% from June. When you initially heard these numbers, what were your thoughts, and what should the Biden administration be doing to change this course of this increase in migrants that we're seeing?
Well, the numbers are really astronomical in a sense for those that follow those monthly numbers in any given year. What we've seen since the Biden administration has taken over is month after month, these numbers have gotten incrementally worse, and in some cases, significantly worse. And so March was worse than February, April worse than March, and you can keep going all the way into the July numbers, which you just talked about, which we're now over 212,000 illegal apprehensions in 1 month alone. For those that follow this, 50 to 60,000 in a month is fairly typical. It kind of goes up and it kind of goes down a little bit. So you're at 3 times that amount. And there's no end in sight. Usually what we see during the summer months of June, July, and August, because it's very hot in the desert, is those numbers tend to decrease because migrants are not making that journey. But we see that the cartels and others are taking advantage of the lax border security that we have at the border and are shoveling as many of those illegal aliens across the border as humanly possible. They've broken the system. CBP can't keep up, HHS can't keep up, and that's why you see these images of thousands of illegal aliens sitting under a bridge waiting to be processed. We simply don't have the capacity because we've never seen these numbers before. And so it's an absolute crisis what's going on down there. It's a humanitarian crisis, it's a security crisis, and it's a public health crisis.
And of course, among these migrants are children, and there was also a 24% increase in the amount of children that were encountered from just June to July. In July itself, there were 18,962 children that were encountered. What is happening? I mean, how are these children getting across? Are they, victims of cartels? Are they being helped, I guess, by human smugglers? Like, how are they able to get across the border?
So it's a little bit of everything, right? It's their parents that are sending them over, but they're also being trafficked. They're also being smuggled, some against their will. And so it's a very dangerous situation that's going on. And so the question is how and why is this occurring now? And I can tell you why, because the Biden administration in the very first week of their tenure said that any minor who comes to the United States will not be removed. And if you hear that, and that's being advertised, guess what? If you are under the age of 17, you're going to try to get to that border as quickly as possible because the Biden administration will take you in, they will find you a sponsor, and they will send you out, whether you're COVID positive or not, and you will remain here in the United States. And so that is a significant pull factor or incentive for those to come here illegally. And when we talk about minors, we're not talking about 8-year-olds. The vast majority, over 75% of folks, are between the ages of 15 and 17. And so these are, almost adults that are coming here and that are staying here. So that's why you see this increase month over month of minors, or what we call UACs, unaccompanied alien children, coming into the country, and there is no end in sight.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think, as you mentioned, month after month, we're seeing this increase in migrants trying to come across the border. And something that we're also seeing are, this essential wave of drugs that are also coming across the border. And, we see headlines about, drugs being seized by CBP or we see it being stopped in its tracks. But for the drugs that aren't stopped, I mean, what impact will that have on our communities? And when will people realize that, aside from people coming over the border, there's also drugs?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. They're all connected. And so the money that and the profit that the cartels are making on smuggling individuals, it's millions of dollars a day, not a week and not a month, but a day, millions of dollars that they then funnel back into their criminal enterprise so that they are able to smuggle those illegal narcotics across the border at record numbers. And some of the seizures that we've seen have been at ports of entry. That's where we have the infrastructure, that's where we have agents, and that's where we have some of the technology that can detect this. What I'm most concerned about are not what we're catching at ports of entry, it's what's coming in between ports of entry. And that we just don't know. We're not apprehending that. Why? Because most of our agents are focused on taking care of these thousands of minors in their custody. So they're not on the line, what we call on the line, doing their national security mission, keeping bad people, criminals, terrorists, and others out of the country, and keeping illegal narcotics and other illegal contraband out of the country. And so we just don't know everything else that's getting through at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying, obviously to catch the drugs that are coming in, but also to have that uncertainty about what's not being caught and what's being, being let into our country, into the interior of the country, not just in the border states. Something else I wanted to ask you about, obviously, not everyone who's coming across the border is doing it with, bad intent. Some people are seeking legit safety concerns and are here to claim asylum. So how are these numbers impacting those people who have legit claims for asylum, and how are you able to differentiate the people who are here for legit reasons?
Yeah, well, it's significantly impacting their ability to get the protections that they need at the end of the day. And so when you have the type of numbers that we see, is you can't adjudicate cases nearly quick enough. And so the people that have legitimate concerns, safety concerns, and need those asylum protections are not getting their day in court, right, before an immigration judge until months and years down the line, because now the system is so overwhelmed, because the vast majority of these folks are in fact claiming asylum, but we know the vast majority will not qualify for asylum at the end of the day, yet they continue to clog up the system that we see. And so it's really doing a disservice to those that are truly fleeing for their lives and could qualify for protection under our asylum laws, that they will not get their day in court nearly soon enough as they should. And we tried to address that, or we did address that during the Trump administration when we put in the migrant protection protocols in place. It rooted out the fraud that we see in that asylum process. The Biden team knows that there's an immense amount of fraud in the asylum process. They're not doing much about it at the moment. They've reverted back to the way it was at the end of the Obama administration, which is having those cartel members and illegal aliens take advantage of our broken asylum laws for their advantage and not for the advantage of the American people.
And something also on top of all of these, record-breaking numbers, we have COVID-19 still going on, and a coworker of mine, Kaylee Greenlee, actually got this video it was a leaked video that showed hundreds of migrants, of COVID-positive migrants being held at a camp in Texas. Obviously, COVID for these migrants is still very much of a threat. In McAllen, Texas, I believe since February, at least 7,000 migrants who tested positive for COVID were released. They just declared a state of disaster there. How do you address that situation on top of, this wave of migrants that are already coming?
Well, it's certainly challenging for the Border Patrol. Again, they're overwhelmed. And I would say that this administration continues to talk about mask mandates for the American people, vaccination rates, but they completely ignore all of this when it comes to illegal aliens coming across our border. And so what we see down there today are communities that are having to deal with this public health crisis that is occurring on their own. The federal government's doing very little to assist them. And so you're seeing very, very high positivity rates from families as well as from minors, sometimes in the 19 to 20% range. Then we had buses, right? So they can't keep them all in RGV in the McAllen, Brownsville area, so they're having to bus them to other areas. And they bussed them to Laredo last week, and they found a 40% positivity rate amongst those. And they're in these crowded conditions, so you can imagine how COVID will continue to spread. So it's, like I said, they've broken the system by the sheer numbers that are going on now. And I think what we're seeing is the result of that from a COVID perspective, that it continues to grow, the positivity rates continue because there's not enough facilities. There's too many people in cramped conditions at the end of the day.
What's the solution for that? Is it build more facilities? Is it, I guess, ramp up the testing, ramp up, I guess, the resources?
No, I think the wrong approach here, which people jump to right away, which is how do we test more? How do we build more facilities? How do we accommodate more and more people? And I would say if you do that, more and more will come. And that's not the solution at the end of the day. You need to make sure that folks that come in here illegally, coming into the country, breaking the law, that there is a consequence to that. Meaning that if they don't have a legitimate asylum claim and we need to adjudicate that pretty quickly, then you return them back to their home country. Because that's, they want to come here for economic reasons largely. There's a small percentage that will qualify for asylum. So you have to figure out where is that small percentage, but everyone else who decides to come here illegally for the wrong reasons needs to be deported and removed back to their home countries. And until you do that, which the Biden administration is not doing, if you're a minor, you stay here. If you're a family unit, you stay here. Single adults, some are staying here as well. So there's a number of things that you can do, but you got to hold individuals who choose to break the law. There needs to be a consequence to that, right? There's a reason you and I don't drive 90 miles an hour in our neighborhood, right? We could kill someone, it's against the law, we could get a ticket, driver's license revoked. There's a consequence for that illegal behavior. And right now on the border, there's very little consequence going on.
Well, Chad, I so appreciate you coming on to break down these numbers from July. As I mentioned earlier, a 21-year record. It'll be interesting to see if the numbers continue to rise or if the Biden administration will address the ongoing crisis. I'd love to have you back on to talk about that, whether it's good or bad. Thank you so much for joining me today.
All right. Well, thank you.